Deep in a German cave, archaeologists made a discovery that would rewrite the history of human creativity. What they found wasn't a weapon, wasn't a tool for survival, but something far more profound, a 40,000-year-old flute carved from a vulture's wing bone. This wasn't just ancient, it was a window into the soul of our ancestors, proving that music isn't a luxury of civilization, but a fundamental part of what makes us human. The Hohle Fels flute, discovered in 2008, challenges everything we thought we knew about prehistoric life. While our ancestors were supposedly focused solely on survival, hunting mammoths and fighting off predators, they were also sitting around fires, crafting delicate instruments, and creating melodies that echoed through Ice Age valleys. The precision required to drill perfectly spaced holes into a hollow bird bone without modern tools, without metal, is staggering. But here's where it gets truly mysterious. This flute wasn't a crude first attempt. The craftsmanship suggests a long tradition of instrument making that came before it. Somewhere lost to time, there are even older instruments we haven't found yet. The Hohle Fels flute is just the survivor, the one that happened to be preserved in the perfect conditions of a limestone cave. What's even more fascinating is what this flute tells us about Neanderthals. For decades, we believed music was uniquely human, something that separated us from our extinct cousins. But recent discoveries have shattered that assumption. Neanderthal sites have yielded bone flutes with similar construction, suggesting that musical expression might have been shared across human species. The Babe flute from Slovenia, potentially 60,000 years old, has sparked one of archaeology's most heated debates. Is it a Neanderthal-made instrument, or just a bone that a cave bear chewed on? The holes align too perfectly to be random, yet some scientists remain skeptical. If it is indeed an instrument, it predates modern human arrival in Europe, meaning Neanderthals were composing music before we even got there. Consider the implications. Music predates agriculture, predates writing, predates civilization itself. Our ancestors were making music before they built permanent homes, before they domesticated animals, before they planted crops. Music wasn't something that emerged from leisure time in settled societies. It was there from the beginning, as essential as language itself. The oldest instruments reveal something unexpected about prehistoric priorities. Creating a functional flute from bone requires hours of careful work, specialized knowledge, and multiple failed attempts. In a world where every moment counted for survival, why invest this time? The answer suggests music served a crucial purpose: social bonding, ritual, communication, or perhaps something we can't even imagine from our modern perspective. Archaeologists have attempted to recreate these ancient flutes using the same materials and techniques available 40,000 years ago. The process is incredibly difficult. The bone must be cleaned, dried, and carefully measured. Each hole must be drilled at precise intervals using stone tools, a process that can take days and often results in cracked, unusable bones. Yet our ancestors mastered this craft. When researchers finally played reconstructed versions of these ancient flutes, the sounds were hauntingly beautiful. The tones were clear, melodic, and surprisingly sophisticated. These weren't simple whistles. They were capable of producing complex musical scales. Imagine sitting in a cave 40,000 years ago, firelight dancing on the walls, and hearing these ethereal notes floating through the darkness. The discovery of ancient flutes raises a tantalizing question. What other instruments existed that simply didn't survive? Wood rots, plant fibers decay, animal skins disintegrate. We only find bone and stone because they're durable. Our ancestors likely had drums made from hollowed logs, rattles from gourds, stringed instruments from sinew and wood. An entire orchestra of prehistoric music has vanished, leaving only the most indestructible pieces behind. In China's Henan province, archaeologists unearthed a set of flutes made from the wing bones of red-crowned cranes dating back 9,000 years. What makes these instruments extraordinary isn't just their age, but their sophistication. They're precisely tuned to specific musical scales, some matching scales still used in Chinese music today. This suggests an unbroken musical tradition spanning 9 millennia.
The jiahu flutes, as they're called, were found in graves alongside other precious objects, indicating that musicians held special status in ancient society. These weren't casual hobbyists, they were respected members of the community, perhaps shamans or ritual specialists. The flutes were buried with their owners, suggesting a belief that music would be needed in the afterlife. Testing these ancient Chinese flutes revealed something astonishing. They're still playable. After 9,000 years in the ground, these instruments can still produce clear, resonant notes. When a modern musician played one for the first time in millennia, the sound was described as melancholic and deeply moving, as if the flute remembered the songs it once played. But flutes aren't the only ancient instruments that have survived. In France, archaeologists discovered what might be the world's oldest percussion instrument, a mammoth bone that shows clear signs of being struck repeatedly with another object. The wear patterns and acoustic properties suggest it was used as a drum or xylophone-like instrument around 30,000 years ago. Cave paintings from the same era sometimes depict figures holding objects that appear to be musical instruments. In the Cave of the Three Brothers in France, a famous painting shows a figure that might be playing a bow-like instrument, possibly the ancestor of all stringed instruments. If true, this pushes the history of string music back to the Ice Age. The bull rower, one of the simplest yet most widespread ancient instruments, has been found in archaeological sites across multiple continents. It's just a piece of wood or bone attached to a string, but when whirled through the air, it produces an eerie, roaring sound that carries for miles. Aboriginal Australians have used bull rowers for at least 20,000 years in sacred ceremonies, making it one of the longest continuously used instruments in human history. What's remarkable about the bull rower is its universal appearance. Cultures that had no contact with each other independently invented this instrument. From Australia to Africa to the Americas, humans discovered that a spinning object on a string creates a supernatural sound. This suggests that certain musical innovations are almost inevitable, hardwired into human creativity. Conch shell trumpets represent another ancient instrument found worldwide. In Peru, archaeologists discovered decorated conch shells dating back 3,000 years, used in religious ceremonies. In India, the shankha has been blown in temples for millennia. In ancient Greece, the Triton's trumpet was both a musical instrument and a symbol of power. The same basic idea, independently developed across oceans and continents. The oldest drums present a unique archaeological challenge because organic materials rarely survive. However, in China, archaeologists found evidence of alligator skin drums dating back 4,000 years. The drums themselves had decayed, but the distinctive pattern of alligator scales left impressions in the soil, allowing researchers to reconstruct their original form and size. In Ireland, wooden horns called crwth have been found preserved in peat bogs, some dating back 2,000 years. The acidic, oxygen-free environment of the bog perfectly preserved these instruments, complete with the finger marks of their last players. When replicas were made and played, they produced deep, resonant tones that would have carried across ancient battlefields and ceremonial grounds. The lyre, one of the most important instruments in ancient civilizations, has a history stretching back at least 5,000 years. The royal cemetery of in Iraq yielded several lyres decorated with gold and lapis lazuli, instruments so valuable they were buried with kings. These weren't simple folk instruments, they were masterpieces of craftsmanship, suggesting that by 2500 BCE, music had become a sophisticated art form. What's particularly moving about the lyres is that we can see the fingerprints of their makers in the wood and the wear patterns from countless hours of playing. These instruments were loved, used frequently, and maintained carefully. Someone 4,500 years ago sat with one of these lyres, tuning it, practicing scales, perhaps composing songs that are now lost forever. The discovery of ancient musical notation has allowed researchers to actually hear some of these lost songs. The Hurrian hymn, found on a clay tablet in Syria, is the oldest known written music, dating to approximately 1400 BCE. When scholars finally deciphered the notation and played it on a reconstructed lyre, they heard a melody that hadn't been performed in over 3,000 years. But even this ancient hymn is relatively recent compared to the instruments themselves. For tens of thousands of years before writing existed, music was passed down orally, from generation to generation. Every melody, every rhythm, every song was memorized and taught, creating an unbroken chain of musical tradition stretching back to the Ice Age. The question of why music evolved in humans has puzzled scientists for decades. Unlike language, which has obvious survival benefits, music seems unnecessary for basic survival. Yet it appears in every human culture, suggesting it serves some fundamental purpose. Some researchers believe music evolved as a social bonding mechanism, helping early humans coordinate activities and strengthen group cohesion. Others argue that music is a byproduct of language evolution, an auditory cheesecake, as one scientist dismissively called it, pleasant but ultimately useless. But this theory struggles to explain why humans would invest so much time and resources into creating complex instruments if music served no purpose. The archaeological evidence suggests music was important enough to warrant significant effort and innovation. Recent studies have shown that music activates multiple areas of the brain simultaneously, more than almost any other activity. It engages our emotions, our memories, our motor control, and our social instincts all at once. Perhaps music isn't a single adaptation, but a convergence of multiple cognitive abilities, making it uniquely powerful for human consciousness.
The preservation of ancient instruments often depends on extraordinary circumstances. In Egypt, the dry desert climate has preserved wooden instruments that would have rotted anywhere else. Archaeologists have found harps, flutes, and percussion instruments in tombs, sometimes still decorated with paint and inlays, looking almost new despite being thousands of years old. One of the most unusual ancient instruments is the lithophone, essentially a musical stone. In Vietnam, researchers discovered stone slabs that, when struck, produce clear musical notes. These lithophones date back 3,000 years and were carefully selected and shaped to produce specific pitches. Similar stone instruments have been found in Africa and South America, suggesting that humans recognized the musical potential of rocks long before metal instruments existed. The didgeridoo, used by Aboriginal Australians for at least 1,500 years, represents one of the most unique wind instruments ever created. Made from eucalyptus branches hollowed out by termites, it produces a deep droning sound unlike any other instrument. The circular breathing technique required to play it continuously is so difficult that it takes years to master, yet Aboriginal musicians have been perfecting this art for millennia. What makes the didgeridoo particularly interesting is that it might be much older than archaeological evidence suggests. Aboriginal oral traditions speak of the instrument being used for tens of thousands of years, and given that wood doesn't preserve well in tropical climates, the oldest examples have likely decomposed. The didgeridoo we find from 1,500 years ago might represent a tradition stretching back to the Ice Age. In Scandinavia, archaeologists have found bronze lyres, curved horns that date back 3,000 years. These instruments were found in pairs, suggesting they were played together in harmony or call and response patterns. When modern musicians played reconstructed lyres, they discovered the instruments could produce surprisingly complex harmonies, indicating that Bronze Age musicians understood musical theory far better than previously assumed. The pan flute, found in various forms across South America, Europe, and Asia, represents another independently invented instrument. The oldest known pan flutes date back 2,000 years, but the simplicity of the design suggests they're much older. All you need is hollow reeds or bamboo of different lengths, and you have a complete musical scale. It's elegant, portable, and effective. Ancient bells and chimes represent some of the most technologically advanced instruments of the prehistoric world.
Casting bronze bells requires sophisticated metallurgy, precise measurements, and an understanding of acoustics. Yet by 2000 BCE, Chinese craftsmen were creating elaborate sets of bells, each tuned to specific notes, capable of playing complex melodies. The Marquis Yi of Zhang's bells, discovered in China and dating to 433 BCE, represent the pinnacle of ancient bell-making. This set of 65 bells covers 5 octaves and can play 2 different notes depending on where they're struck. The acoustic engineering required to create this effect is so sophisticated that modern scientists are still studying how ancient craftsmen achieved it without computers or electronic tuning devices. As we look at these ancient instruments, we're not just seeing objects, we're seeing evidence of human creativity, ingenuity, and the universal need for artistic expression. Every culture, in every era, has created music. From the Ice Age caves of Europe to the deserts of Egypt, from the jungles of South America to the steppes of Asia, humans have always made music. The oldest musical instruments ever found tell us something profound about who we are as a species. We're not just tool makers or problem solvers, we're artists, musicians, and dreamers. 40,000 years ago, in a world of danger and hardship, our ancestors took time to create beauty, to make music, to express something beyond mere survival. And in doing so, they left us a legacy that continues to resonate through every song we sing, every instrument we play, every melody that moves us. Music isn't just part of human culture, it's part of human nature, as ancient and essential as language itself.